So my talk this morning is on the necessity of hope. The necessity of hope. You know, I talk to so many people who are living in despair and in depression. They don't see anything hopeful for the future. They don't see a greater possibility. And one thing I notice about them is they spend a great deal of time focusing on the news and getting their information from social media. And they're talking to a whole group of people that are reinforcing their negativity. And they enjoy it. They enjoy it. It makes them so much fun to be around. It really does. Now, in challenging times, and almost any period of human existence is challenging. Helen Keller, the wonderful, wise spiritual leader, she said the idea of security in human existence is largely a myth. It's just not a reality. She says it's better to live life full on than to try to be safe. So we want to live fully, and it requires us to be hopeful. To go through our lives, we're going to have challenges, and some which will seem pretty insurmountable. And it's easy to come into hopelessness and despair. So it's critical that we remind ourselves that hope is not just a fleeting emotion, it's a powerful force that can propel us forward even in the face of adversity. Because even in the darkest nights can give way to the most brilliant dawns. I spoke this Friday, 2 nights ago at Temple Bet Yam, and I was just so humbled by the congregation. Most of them are reeling from horror stories. Most of them have friends, if not family, that are directly impacting what's going on in Israel right now. But the rabbi reminded them that in the midst of our sorrow, we're to remind ourselves that there's joy in life. And he talked about the bread that they sanctify at the end of their service. And it's a bread it has plaits to it. And the reason that he says it has plaits to it is because that symbolizes both the joy and the sorrow of life, intertwined together, hand in hand. And that's part of life. There's joy and there's trouble. We want to recognize that and not pull away from it, but at the same time, to encourage ourselves to do the best we can with what we have. Challenges are going to come to us. Our teaching is, we don't tell you can live a problem-free life, because there's no such thing as a problem-free life. We just give you the tools to handle the problems that come your way. My teacher, Kennedy Schultz, he had an interesting observation. He says, you talk to somebody that's had a major problem in their life, they worry about it over and over again, deal with it year in, year out. He said they finally get a solution to it. He says the problem comes back to them again. And he says, what do? They say, no problem. I know how to handle it, no problem. He said it was no problem to begin with. It was only a problem in their consciousness. They had made it into a problem. It wasn't a problem for the mind of God. So we have to remind ourselves not to give in to despair or depression, to be realistic, to do what we can with what we have, but be creative and proactive and give the rest over to God. If you're dealing with something you can't come up with an answer for it, give it over to Spirit. It's God's universe after all, and so I don't have to come up with an answer for everything. And amazingly, throughout history, miracles happen. Miracles happen. Even though sometimes it seems like humanity is slow to catch on, we do evolve. I remember being a child in Macon, Georgia, and Dr. King would come on the television on the evening news. And I remember hearing his one speech where he talked about how there would come a time when the ancestors of slave owners and the ancestors of slaves would gather together on the top of Stone Mountain in Atlanta and celebrate their humanity. Now, at that time, the top of Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia, was where the Ku Klux Klan met. And at that time, I remember my family, my adults in my family, would fuss and fume and say it'll never happen. But guess what? It's a possibility. It could happen today easily. Easily. 30 years ago, there was not an expert, there was not a political expert, a military expert, or a religious expert that would tell you that the Catholics and the Protestants of Northern Ireland could live in peace. But now, largely, they do. Largely, they do. They don't necessarily like each other that much, but at least they're not killing each other. We can learn. We can evolve. And miracles can happen. So we want to stay focused on the miraculous. Stay informed about what's going on in the world, and then seek to be a blessing where you can. To do what you're able to do. The rabbi was talking about how what their congregation is doing. They're helping fund an ambulance in Israel. Well, I think that's a wonderful, healthy thing to do. It's not picking sides. It's saying, here's something we can do to help. This is going to be a thing of healing, a blessing. So I hope, I'm going to mention to the board, I'd love if we send a little bit of money to them. You know, how can we focus on healing and not make the problem worse? Because the other thing I've noticed about negative people is that they not only resist notions of improvement, that really kind of gets them angry. You know, when you throw out a suggestion, well, maybe this can happen, maybe that can, they get mad about that. They relish in the idea that things are bad and they're getting worse. They really enjoy the whole notion that things are not working out. And if you throw out an idea, well, this could happen, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They like the idea that things are not working out and they're getting worse. And I have a warning from them. If you're in this kind of consciousness, you better watch out. Because if you keep that up, write my words down, you keep that up, sooner or later you'll get elected to Congress. That's where you're going to end up. And you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. So our focus is to stay focused on our greater possibilities. Dr. Holmes, the founder of our teaching, he says the greatest power within us is our belief in ourselves and our connection with the divine. With this, with hope and faith, we can transform any challenge into an opportunity for growth. And we can look at any turmoil and says, as bad as this is, I choose to see a greater possibility for more love and peace. And then do what we can to make that a reality. Because for peace to take root, it first must take root in our own hearts and souls. We can't be in places of anger and expect love to break out. It first has to happen within our own hearts and soul. Louise Hay said, every thought we think is creating our future. The power of our positivity and hope can heal our lives and guide us towards a greater tomorrow. Heal our lives. In Scripture, they says there's a story that Jesus was traveling. He was on a boat with his disciples. He went and took a nap. A storm comes up, and the disciples were all terrified about it. They thought they were going to be overwhelmed. They'd all be drowned. They go wake him up. And he's like, what is your problem? And he goes out and he looks at the water and he says, be quiet. Be still. We can't allow ourselves to get all wrapped up in the emotion. It's good to be able just to take a breath and step back from it all, not to add to the problem, not to give more energy to the problem. Dr. Holmes did the exact same thing. There's a story about him. He was in L.A. Of course, you know how warm L.A. can be. And he had invited all the ministers of our teaching to come to this convention. And a couple of hours before they were to gather in the auditorium. They came to him and they said, the AC is not working. And he's got all these hot-winded ministers coming to this unair-conditioned auditorium. And they said he went out and stood in the middle of it. And he said, now, all right, Spirit, you've inspired me to create this teaching. You've inspired me to call these ministers here. I've got to have them comfortable and feeling good about it. We need an answer to this air conditioning. God, this is Ernest Holmes, and that's enough. This is me, God, Ernest. Solve this. Sometimes you just have to put it out there. Say, look, I'm doing my part. Spirit, you've got to step up and do yours. Love that in the Jewish teaching. The Jewish teaching is, they say we're people of the covenant. We do our part, and we can expect spirits to do its. And so we just don't want to get ourselves wound up. Sometimes we'll get ourselves in such a place of turmoil, we can't even see what's right in front of us. Yesterday, I was here at the center. I thought I would come here and finish my talk. And this place yesterday was like Penn Station. People were coming in and out. We had two groups come that wanted to rent the space, and so I was showing them around. Around 2 o'clock, we had another group that were having a cookout outside, and the one woman that was organizing it, she wanted it all to be perfect. And she had a whole crew of people, and they had finally gotten to the place they just were ignoring her altogether. And at a certain point, I had locked myself into the office because I was like, I'm getting out of this little turmoil. And she comes banging on the door, and she tells me, she said, I've got to have a can opener. And I said, well, we'll go see if we can find one in the hospitality. I go in the hospitality. There's the can opener on the counter. Somebody had already gotten it for her and laid it out, but in her turmoil, she couldn't see it and had to come bother me. Yeah. She didn't do it a second time, I'll tell you. Yeah. We can get ourselves so wrapped up, we don't even see what's right in front of us. One of the things that my wonderful friend, Reverend David Williamson from the Grace United Methodist Church downtown, he was at the gathering on Friday. And he talked about how that in our turmoil, we should just breathe, to remember to breathe. And he said that he had read that the sound of our breath actually mimics the Hebrew name of God. So our very breath is announcing spirit in the physical. When we breathe, it's to remind ourselves that we are not alone, that we've got this power flowing through us, empowering us, opening ourselves up to potential, that we can have an impact on this world in the midst of a storm with a broken air conditioner or looking for a can opener. Spirit is with us, and there's a path for us to take. Hope enables us to shift our perspective, allowing us to see possibilities where others only see obstacles. And we can get to the place where we can know that even the obstacles are pulling us towards a greater truth, a higher vibration. Greg Braden said, we are not just observers of our world, we are active participants in shaping it. Our thoughts and emotions cause a ripple effect that extend beyond our imagination. We're having an impact not just for ourselves, but those around us and for the collective of all of humanity. I was so impressed with the rabbi when he did his final prayer. He asked the congregation not just to hold hands, but to lock arms, arm in arm together, almost making one huge hug out of the whole congregation. And you never know how just one little positive comment, one little positive gesture, how much that can mean to someone. So we want to be channels of this positive energy. We want to be channels of Spirit's love, its encouragement, its inspiration. I had met before we conducted the service, we met with the rabbi in his office, And he really was overwhelmed. He was concerned about the event itself. He was very anxious about everything being in place. There were a lot of moving parts. He talked a little bit about knowing people that are being held hostages, actually some children that are being held hostages. But when he got in front of that audience, he transformed because he knew he had to get in front of them and he had to lift them up. He knew he had to raise them up. He knew he couldn't give into his fears and doubts, his worries and concerns, that he had a responsibility, a job to bring forth God's light right in front of that congregation. And he did it. At one point, he left the stage and he went and got a tambourine from his audience so he can get out there, and he was banging that tambourine for all it's worth. He was lifting up, he was encouraging, he was inspiring even greater than what he was feeling inside. To remain hopeful in the dark, it's not a choice, it's a responsibility. And we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to each other, we owe it to the world. Jewish scripture, they talk about that when Moses was fleeing Egypt, he got to the Red Sea. And they said when he first stepped out into the Red Sea, those waters didn't immediately part. He stepped out into the cold waters of the Red Sea, but he did not stop. He kept moving on because he knew in faith that he had to keep moving on. He knew he had a whole nation of Israel behind him, and he had to get them to a place of safety. And so in his faith, he kept moving on. Now, I know many of us this morning, we may be knee-deep in the cold waters of despair and turmoil, but for the sake of ourselves and each other and creation as a whole, we've got to keep moving on in faith. We've got to keep on the march. We've got to keep on the knowing. See, Dr. King he prophesied today when the children of Georgia would be able to gather together on Stone Mountain. He wasn't able to see it, but he moved on faith in the hope that it would happen. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to have a vision of the world we want to live in, and we got to keep moving on it. When we open ourselves up to infinite potential within us, we can rise above any challenge, no matter how daunting it may seem. So hold on to hope. Hold on to your divine inspiration and imagination. Hold on to the visions of the Jewish children and Palestinian children playing together peacefully and safely one day in Jerusalem. Hold on to the vision of Russian soldiers dropping their arms and going back from the lands of Ukraine. Hold on to the vision of our politicians being able to get together and work towards our greater good. When you hold on to hope and faith and inspiration, you become a beacon of light. The night has been long, the storm has blown hard, but there's coming a breaking day, and it's going to be bright and glorious with the love and joy and compassion of God. And we're all going to get there. No, not one of us shall be missing. And on that big, bright, beautiful day, we will hold our hands arm in arm, and we will sing out the glory of God made manifest through our love, our joy, and our compassion. It's a coming day, and we'll be there. It's the truth in your life this morning. It's the truth in mine, and so it is.